Welcome back to this afternoon's Budget Committee. My name is Lene Palmisano. I chair this committee, and with me here on the dais this afternoon are council members Jenkins, Fletcher, Cunningham, Schrader, and Johnson. I imagine we will have more as they filter back after lunch. Right before we broke, we did have a bit of a mix-up, and we want to yield the floor to Director Jean Ranieri to give a brief presentation about intergovernmental relations. Welcome, Director Ranieri.
Madam Chair and committee members, thank you very much. My name is Jean Ranieri. I'm the Director of Government Relations for the city. I think our first slide will show what we are tasked to do. We are in the coordinator's office. We have maybe 4 major functions, and they include government relations, which means federal, state, metropolitan council, airports commission. We spend a lot of time developing policies, legislation for your approval to bring to the Capitol or to the Met Council, and sometimes even to the federal government. We also are involved with, some of you work with us in some of those issues. For example, two of our council members, one serves on the League of Minnesota Cities, and another serves on Metro Cities. Councilmember Fletcher's on Metro Cities, Councilmember Johnson's on the League of Minnesota Cities. So it gives us a really good idea of what's happening at the regional level and at the state level. We also, as a staff, attend all the meetings of the policy committees during the year, and I have the honor to serve on the committee, on the Metro Cities Committee too, because we have 2 members. In government relations right now, the major issue is getting ready for the 2020 session. We brought some information yesterday to our committee. We will continue to work on our program and have it ready before the end of November. In regional relationships and partnerships, Ms. Olson from our office spends an awful lot of time at the Met Council, and we're spending a lot of time also at the Metropolitan Airports Commission. We work very closely with those folks. We have many things that we need to work with. Noise at the airport, at the Met Council, transit, housing, wastewater, and things of that nature. So we have a lot of, what helps us too through all the things we do, we have a legislative or a policy team of city staff members who meet with us during the summer and during the session all year round, where we go over issues, and we can use these folks as area experts. They can help us at either the Capitol or at the Met Council or at the MAC. And every city department contributes someone to their time to us, and during the session, we use them. In terms of grants management, Mr. Bauer runs that organization. What he does there is making sure we comply with federal regulations and can receive federal funding, particularly the community development suite of funds, which includes CDBG, which I think we're into year 47, the emergency shelter grants, home grant, and HOPWA. And when you look at the budget, there is an increase in federal funds, and that basically is from HOPWA. We also we give technical assistance to city departments to apply for federal, state, and we're seeing more and more private foundations reaching out and making cities eligible for certain activities. And then in enterprise policy support, this is basically an area where we serve on work groups for the city. For example, we were involved in the Community Action Program. We still are. We are involved in the lock and dam issues. We have people sitting on the short-term rental work group and several others. So we do have a 7-person staff. We are authorized 8 members. We're in the process of hiring another person, which would be paid out of federal funds to help with the grant program. And Madam Chair, I'll stand for questions. We have no budget changes.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from my colleagues? I'm not seeing any. Thank you very much for this briefing.
Thank you very much.
Yep. Next, we'll hear from NCR with Director David Rubidor. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Palmisano and council members. Good afternoon. I'm David Rubidor, the Director of the Neighborhood and Community Relations Department with the City of Minneapolis. And today I'm here to present the Mayor's 2020 budget recommendations for our department. You can find the Mayor's or the recommended budget on pages 323 through 332 of the Mayor's budget book. Just first of all, starting off a little bit of an overview with the NCR department. We are really charged with providing strategic support for this enterprise's community engagement needs. We work extensively with the city's neighborhood organizations as well as a lot of the community partners that we have in order to build better relationships between the city and the community in order to share information as well as provide equitable access to city programs, services, and the city's decision-making process. So whether it's through our world-class neighborhood system or through our cultural engagement work with many of our community partners, we recognize that people engage in many different ways. And so we have employed a number of different strategies which I'll talk about in a minute, in order to really make sure that we're reaching everybody in our city. Sometimes our work is visibly out front as we lead to different projects, but more often you're going to find us working in collaboration with departments and other neighborhood organizations more behind the scenes in supporting the work that they're doing. We adhere to the International Association of Public Participation's framework to provide consistency and support for authentic engagement while providing training and support for the city departments and community members. And one of the things that we have really seen in the last several years is the use of the department by other city departments has grown considerably. And as I'm talking today, hopefully that'll be reflected in some of my talking points. Just real quickly, touching base on how the department is organized. Most of our staff actually report directly to the deputy director. We have our community engagement, our community specialists and our neighborhood specialists working together as a team. We also have our Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs, which is a new addition to the department. And then we have our Internal Services Manager, which supports connecting this work with the, taking the lead on working with other city departments. The one thing I want to kind of point out too at the beginning here is that the Neighborhood and Community Relations Department, which brings together folks that are staff that are professionals and engaging cultural communities, working with our neighborhood system, which is like none other in the United States, bringing together the Americans with the Disabilities Act, the language access work, as well as the Office of the Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs under one department, working on all these access issues and all these engagement issues for the city collectively is like no other department that I'm aware of in the United States. So this is a very unique model. So I want to spend a couple of minutes before I actually get into the budget changes and our current budget, just really kind of giving a highlight on some of the things that we actually do. Our budget is organized into three functional areas, the first of which is access and outreach. So we support the city's ability to meet the federally mandated civil rights and accessibility requirements, such as Americans with Disabilities Act and the limited English proficiency plans. And oftentimes, with the leadership of the council, we have been able to exceed federal requirements. We ensure that non-English speaking residents have access to language resources, a service that has grown by over 150% in the last 5 years. And we anticipate that this demand and this need for this service is going to continue to grow in 2020 and beyond. We also have worked with the communications department and the city clerk to improve accessibility for our disabled community to be able to participate. And this year, as we've announced it several times now, that we're going to be able to have the city council meetings be closed, open caption, and caption for our deaf and hard of hearing residents. The newly established Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs works with a lot of community partners and elected officials to make sure that we have a proactive agenda on supporting our immigrant and refugee community needs. And this budget program also includes the American Indian Communities MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding, and the One Minneapolis Fund. The second program budget area that we have is what's called Coordinated Engagement Services, and this is where we really pull together the power of our neighborhood specialists and our cultural engagement specialists to work together to really support the city in connecting with different parts of the community. As part of this work, we really focus in on also building the capacity of other city staff in order to do good engagement work. And so we started a couple years ago what we call our learning labs, which are really about building cultural awareness and cultural appropriate engagement strategies with the immigrant, refugee, disabled community, as well as BIPOC communities. This work has grown a lot. Last year alone, we had 228 individuals attend the learning labs. That's about a 68% increase. This year, we're going to break that number as well by the time we get to the end of the year, and we'll continue to provide the service into 2020. We also provide IAP True training, the International Association of Public Participation training, to city staff. to increase their awareness of various engagement tools that are out there. I think earlier this morning, the communications director mentioned that we work in partnership with them on 4 radio shows to communicate to different cultural communities in the city, specifically the African American, the Hmong, Spanish, and Somali. And this is part of a broader effort to making sure that information is being shared and discussed within all communities in our city, regardless of language or culture. And that's been very successful. In fact, we're on our 4th year now of being on La Raza. We are this year, and we'll be continuing to next year collaborate with the city clerk's office and communications to really increase participation for underengaged residents, particularly renters, youth, and BIPOC communities with the upcoming 2020 census and with the 2020 elections. I have to say this is going to be a major focus of the department. It is right now and will continue to be through the majority of 2020. A lot of our resources are going behind this to really increase this, because we believe this is a strong equity issue for our community. Just a couple other examples. Last year, we implemented, actually in 2018, we implemented a new portal on City Talk in order to provide better access for city departments to our resources. And so far in 2019, we've had 38 engagement requests come through that portal. And so it's been serving as a good way for departments to be able to access our work and know how to use our resources. Some examples that have come from that, just to give you an idea of the range, have included the Transgender Equity Summit, Sabathani and Nokomis Healthy Aging events. We've worked on the conversion therapy ban ordinance and Vision Zero. We also do a number of other kind of like specialty projects around the city in order to improve relations with the community. And one of the things that I'm very, very happy with is that with our new chief of police, we've been working very closely with them to build better relationships between the community and the police department. An example of that would be we have ongoing what are called barbershop conversations with the police chief, who actually goes out into the community. We set up the events. He goes out and meets with the community. It's an open forum. We've done 4 of those so far this year, and we're going to continue to do those. We have found those, and I think he's found those to be very successful. Our final budget program is the Neighborhood Engagement and Support Services. This is what the area where we support our 70 neighborhood organizations in the city, where neighborhood-based priority setting, planning, and the implementation take place. This program area includes the money that goes out through the Community Participation Program, as well as the Neighborhood Revitalization Program. It includes some staffing, and it also includes the support services that we offer and provide to neighborhoods, which includes board training, directors and officers insurance, auditing, legal support, conflict management, among a number of others. This is also where the Neighborhoods 2020 work resides within our department. And I anticipate that the Neighborhoods 2020, which is underway now, we're in our final phase of that work, that should be completed by second quarter of next year, 2020, and then we'll be working with the neighborhoods to do whatever transition comes out of that process and moving forward. So jumping directly into our budget, thanks for indulging me in giving a little bit of background of what we do. Jumping into our 2020 budget and our current service level, there's a number of changes you'll see in our budget, and I'll highlight those in a second. But basically, our service level in 2020 is going to be very similar to what it was in 2019. There is no FTE increase. We're maintaining the current FTE, but the changes that you're going to see are regarding more one-time funding changes. So just to bring up the summary of the changes between 2019 and 2020, Access and Outreach and the Coordinated Engagement Services both have a 29% decrease in funding. The Access and Outreach reduction is due to one-time allocation that we received in 2019 for the closed captioning, for the captioning services, for the city council meetings, and so that's a one-time expenditure. The Coordinated Engagement Services reductions are based on the 2020 census work, which was allocated in 2019, but that work is clearly carrying forward into 2020. But from a budget standpoint, it was placed in 2019. You do see on there's a significant increase, 17.3% to be exact, on the neighborhood engagement and support. This is an estimated number. As I mentioned in the summary of the programming, neighborhood organizations are funded in this program item, which includes the Neighborhood Revitalization Program, NRP, as well as the Community Participation Program. This is an estimated number of what we think that the neighborhoods are going to expend next year. And given that next year is the last year of the community participation program, we anticipate a greater increase in the number of contracts and stuff that will be closing out as that program is coming to an end and before the next program comes online. We will clearly work with the council in building a transition there, but just because of that notion, we anticipate the level of activity on that program is going to increase, and thus it's been increased on our budget. Overall, our budget goes up by 9.7%, and that's entirely due to that change regarding the anticipated expenditures on the neighborhood programming. I do want to also get into a little bit on the other funds category that you see on here, which is the vast majority of the budget for our department. So all the money that's in the other funds category is coming from the Consolidated Tax Increment Finance District, and a little bit of it comes from CDBG. This is the level that's in here, and the source that's in here is the same as that it has existed for several years prior. The 2020 will be the last year when both NCR programming and the Neighborhood Community Participation Program will be primarily funded by the consolidated TIF. So that's for next year. The changes needed to address the elimination of the consolidated TIF do not come into our budget allocations until 2021. So that's the following year. So I just want to make sure that we clearly state that timed out. The Mayor's 2020 recommended budget does include a plan to make available general fund resources to continue current service levels of NCR programming and neighborhood programming beginning in 2021 and draw down the excess consolidated TIF reserves in 2021 through 2023, if that's a policy choice that the City Council and the Mayor make at that time. So I just wanted to make that clear for everyone. Okay, jumping into our change items, we actually only have 2 change items. They're pretty straightforward change items, but very important. Both of these are actually regarding direct services that are provided to residents through community partners that we work with. Both of these are one-time change items. The first one is for aging support services. Currently, we have $80,000 in our budget in 2019 for aging support services. It's a one-time allocation. And with that allocation, we've actually contracted with 4 direct service providers across the city that provide a variety of services for primarily diverse and mostly elderly residents. These residents are both homeowners and renters and predominantly single female-headed households. Most are low income or fixed income, and the services that these programs provide help residents age in place and stay in their homes. Services include, but are not limited to, chronic disease control, fall prevention assessments, mental wellness assessments, blood pressure checks, and transportation. They also work with residents to connect them with other types of resources such as chore services, food, financial, and health resources. This is a one-time allocation, and I'll have to say historically we have funded this work for years, but it's on a one-time every year. We get a one-time allocation to do it, and that dollar amount has changed from year to year, anywhere from $25,000 up to $80,000. This will be the second year in a row now, if the council passes this, that will stay at $80,000. So it's a very important service, and it will be continuing it at the current level that's being provided in 2019. The second change item that we have.
Director Rubidor, we have a couple of questions from colleagues. Looks like Councilmember Schrader.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just first of all, I want to thank your department. We recently put on, I also put on a healthy aging fair and with Nokomis Healthy Seniors, and it was just fantastic, the outreach and services you're able to provide doing that. It was a fantastic success, over 100 folks there. Also just wanted to kind of point out, like, while this $80,000 that we put in is a very small amount, it's also there to leverage other funds that are going away next year. A huge amount of that program is funded by the county, and with their current proposed budget, that money goes away. So it's very critical that we have this in there. I mean, in future budgets, I'll be pushing that this be made not just one time, but an ongoing funding. And I think that we need to look at other ways we can put more in there, especially in light of the county. That was just a comment. You don't need to.
I was going to, Chair Fletcher, Vice Chair Fletcher, and so Councilmember Schrader, I appreciate the compliment very much. I'm glad to hear that you found us to be very helpful with that work. We enjoy putting on those kind of events and appreciate your leadership in pulling that together. This, as I think I was remiss in not saying that these funds actually do leverage a lot of other funds. These organizations do a tremendous amount of work, and what we give them, it helps them, but they clearly use it to get other money as well, and it's very important. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you. Council Vice President Jenkins.
Thank you, Vice Chair Fletcher and Mr. Rubidor. Can you just state what 4 agencies are receiving this funding?
Chair Fletcher and Council Vice President Jenkins. The 4 that are currently being funded are Longfellow Seward Healthy Seniors, Nokomis Healthy Seniors, Southeast Seniors, and Senior Community Services.
Thank you.
And Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to echo the sentiment of my colleague, Councilmember Schrader, on this. And I know that we sent a letter to the county as well that a number of council members signed on to, asking them not to cut their support for these services because they're so vital to thousands of residents across our city and have literally saved lives. So I think I'm not alone when saying we're disappointed to see that cut in their proposed budget, but are very much interested in working on how we can make these organizations whole, because that cut represents, if you include the match, about 20% of a given organization's operating funds for the year. And so it has a substantial service impact at a time when our senior population is only growing in the city. So this is vital work that's being done. We want to continue to see that work being done. I know there's interest among a number of colleagues in finding ways to go above and beyond even this and supporting it. So thank you for managing this and working with these organizations, and hopefully we can help them even more this year.
Thank you. Our second change item is also a one-time request, and this is for our Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs Partnership Agreement Fund. Similar to the Aging Services Fund, this is really a collaboration between the city and a number of community partners that do a tremendous amount of work to support our immigrant and refugee communities in the city. Under the leadership of the mayor and the city council last year, we were able to get the partnership fund established on an ongoing basis at $75,000, which is going to make a tremendous difference in continuing to support these organizations and the work that they do in the city. This year, we're asking for a one-time increase of $25,000. I think the work of these organizations and the work of supporting our immigrant and refugees will always be there. We are in particularly tough times right now, and the demands on our immigrant and refugee communities are like none other that we have seen. Since the council passed the original $75,000 last year, we have not seen, in fact, a decrease in the need for these services. We've actually seen an increase. And so this year we're looking for a $25,000 bump up in order to help expand and continue to support this work. So basically what this provides is that it provides support for our legal partners that serve immigrant and refugee residents by ensuring meaningful access to correct and current information. I got to really stress that. It's really hard to get correct and current information out to a lot of immigrant and refugees in our city, and they provide that. In addition to that, they provide critical legal resources that prevent family separation through deportation, and reduce the emotional trauma, fear, and economic instability that results from the deportation of a loved one. By reducing the fear and instability, this support really enables Minneapolis residents to participate and prosper, to be part of the city as a hub of economic activity and innovation, and to be connected with the city government. Through these funds, what we're able to do is a couple different things. One is create a rapid response for immigration issues that arise in our city. These organizations have agreed to work with the city that when specific immigration issues come up that require a quick response, they work in collaboration with us in order to get the information out and services out for that particular event. It also increases representation for asylum, defense removal proceedings, and U visa applications, as well as supporting standing legal clinics and citizenship classes. Last year, in 2018, about 1,600 Minneapolis residents were served directly by this program, and nearly 800 so far this year as of September of 2019. And just to kind of point out to Councilmember Schrader's point earlier about the leveraging aspect of this, in most situations for an immigrant or refugee that's needing legal services, the cost is running $3,000 to $5,000 per person. So we are, through this program, in essence, helping to leverage a lot of other money in order to support each individual that these organizations are serving. So the last thing I want to do is just close on that this particular program really helps to support the notion that Minneapolis is a safe and welcoming city. So with that, I am available for questions. Otherwise, that concludes my presentation.
I don't see any questions from colleagues. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
I believe next up is IT.
Where is it? Oh,
I gotcha.
thank you. I had to bring up my own file.
I'm IT, here to impress you all with my technical skills.
There we go. Thank you.
Great, so, hello. I'm Beth Cousins. I'm the Deputy Chief Information Officer. It's my pleasure to present the Mayor's recommended budget for the Information Technology Department. We're organized in 8 divisions in IT, so we provide application support for over 400 applications, project management, cybersecurity. We have a small collaboration team which supports, for example, the website and the content management system that feeds it. We have an infrastructure team that provides computers and servers and the network, and a desk side support team, telecom. We have a data and analytics team, a solution engineering team, a service desk team, and finally a small vendor and contract management team. These 8 divisions roll up into 3 programs. So we have the Decision Support Services team. We have a change, a decrease from 2019 to 2020 as a result of a one-time charge, and that was the website project. The Infrastructure Services team has an increase of 1.8%, which is the result of a one-time $150,000 change item, and we moved 2 positions from the Workforce Enablement Program into the Infrastructure Program. And our third program is Workforce Enablement. It's a 3.8% increase, which is the result of us not spreading our administration costs across 3 departments. Beginning in 2020, we'll have all those costs in one program. And so there's an $880,000 that's in there for contract maintenance and licenses. And we also moved 2 positions out to the infrastructure team. Okay, I'll keep going. We have 2 change items. The first is for cybersecurity. So the volume and severity of cybersecurity risks are increasing daily. The threats are really unacceptable to us, and our risks are not only about losing data, but they're also about the potential disruption of our entire computing environment, which would be pretty disastrous for us. Our current staffing level is a director, a security analyst, and a security engineer, which just isn't sufficient for the kind of work they do around monitoring and forensics and operations for all of the protection of the city's email applications, network. We provide awareness training so that people know to recognize phishing attempts, for example, incident response, data loss prevention. So we intend to contribute $100,000 from our managed services operating budget and are asking for $30,000 in ongoing costs to fund 1 additional position. Any questions about this one? Okay. Our second request is for enhanced disaster recovery. So the city is not prepared for a major disruption that might arise from a cybersecurity attack or some act of nature, sabotage. We have only 5 systems under disaster recovery, which means we can get them up in 4 hours if, for example, the data center were to burn down. So there was an audit in 2018, and coming out of that audit, we got direction from council to do a business impact analysis study to understand what our situation would be and what kind of risks we would take on. So we spent $400,000 out of the operating budget to have consultants come in and do this work for us, and it concluded in June. But now we need to take on a couple of additional steps to architect the disaster recovery and processes, and then to implement and test it. We are seeking $450,000 in one-time funds for that, and IT, in addition to the $400,000 it contributed for the business impact analysis, will contribute an additional $150,000 from our managed services contract. Any questions about this one?
I'll put myself in queue, actually, probably more about the last one, although these two kind of together represent the sometimes very unexciting but super important part of what IT does, right? Just making sure that we have continuity, making sure that we're protected in disasters and protected from attacks. So thank you for bringing these forward. And I guess I'm wondering, you mentioned that there's sort of there was an analysis about a best practice and sort of what staffing level would be on par for cybersecurity. And I'm, excuse me, and I'm wondering if the proposed additional staff person gets us to a level that's sort of viewed as a best practice or viewed as a standard level for this size enterprise, or are we still short after making this single additional FTE investment?
Councilmember Fletcher, I don't have with me the exact number we should be at. It does not get us to where we need to be. So the business impact analysis wasn't to necessarily understand exactly how many people we should have on the cybersecurity team. However, in December last year, I had Gartner come in and do an evaluation of the IT departments to help us understand blind spots and where we might be able to improve. They identified 2 areas that we are woefully under-resourced, and they are cybersecurity and infrastructure. So I could do a comparison to find out exactly how many we should have. I know we are understaffed. Okay.
I don't see any other questions, so we can move on to the next presentation, which is human resources. And we are officially a little bit ahead of schedule.
Members of the Budget Committee, I am pleased to present the Mayor's 2020 recommended budget for the Human Resources Department. As the largest and most vibrant city in the state of Minnesota, the city of Minneapolis depends on purposeful, dedicated, and innovative employees of all experience and backgrounds who come together for a singular purpose, serving the residents, businesses, and visitors of our great city. The Human Resources Department, through its mission to attract and engage people to serve our community, supports the city's workforce through the lens of the city's strategic and racial equity goals and action plans. In partnership with department leaders, we strive to create a positive and meaningful workplace experience for all of our employees. And the 4 divisions that we have are reflected here. You can change it. I will now focus on a couple of other items. Number 1 is our service level changes for 2019, as well as the changes to our service level for 2020. We have 2 change items for your consideration. First is the technology around the human capital management system. Technology is the future of work. Our current human resource capital management system was implemented in 1997 and is now outdated, costly, and difficult to maintain. The human capital management system space has evolved at a very rapid pace. Now there are integrated platforms designed to transform the way we do work and create an employee experience that we need and want at the City of Minneapolis. With that in mind, I'd like to share an example of how the City of Minneapolis can leverage technology to improve the employee experience. Picture this. The year is 2021. You applied online for a position at the City of Minneapolis using your smartphone. You interview, get the job offer, and receive the required wage notification information with details about your employment. Now it's time for your first day at work. What does your first day look like? When you bring in the required identification to complete your I-9 form and other employment forms, what is your experience? Does the technology make it easy, quick, and provide you with useful information about your job and working at the city? During your first few days at work, does your experience as an employee confirm your decision to join your team or leave you with a negative impression because of clunky, paper-driven processes and the lack of onboarding tools to learn the duties in your new role? How easy is it to enter your time, schedule your shift, change your shift, check your leave balances, enroll in city benefits, or sign up for direct deposit? How do you request for time off? How do you sign up for training? Check your pay, learn about your employees if you're a supervisor, or make changes to your benefits when you get married, divorced, have a baby, or move. These are some of the things that are important in today's workforce environment, and it's critical that we work to ensure that we have the technology in the workplace that measures up to the technology outside of the workplace. You see, it's not just enough to provide a job anymore. Helping employees do their jobs better and more efficiently, providing real-time data, and providing seamless solutions to questions. That's the important role that a human capital management system plays. Please join us on the exciting journey as we select our new system and start the implementation process. Our request for proposals will be released in 2020, and our goal is for the implementation to be phased beginning in 2021. You see, our employees are our greatest resource, and we believe with the new human capital management system, we'll be providing the tools and support to help our valued employees work smarter and more seamlessly, as well as building solutions for our HR and payroll teams to more easily manage and engage our most valuable asset, our employees. I have one more change item, and this is regarding a $50,000 base cut that has been applied to the general fund operating budget. This concludes my presentation, and I am available to stand for questions.
Thank you. We do have a question or comment from Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair Palmisano. Refresh my memory, because I think we talked about this once before. Mm-hmm. Does this system that you described, will it be in use by every department, or are there departments that are not included in the rollout of the staffing system?
Chair Palmisano and Councilmember Fletcher, this would be for all employees in the City of Minneapolis.
Including MPD?
Including MPD. That is what our goal is.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments from my colleagues? I'm seeing none.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Finance and Property Services, and Interim Coordinator Mark Ruff will be giving the presentation. As all my colleagues know, but we should probably just say in public for the record, Mr. Ruff is our CFO. He went through the budget process as CFO. Thus, the mayor's budget is reflective of his requests and collaboration for the Finance Department. Welcome, Mr. Ruff.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Mark Ruff, the city's interim city coordinator. Speaking to you today about more than 250 employees who are in finance and property services, great folks, and offer a wide variety of internal services for the city. The breadth of the finance and property services department exceeds oftentimes what is typically a finance department in even larger cities. I'm only aware of like Boston having even more encompassed finance department. So on the different divisions are listed on this page. Lori Johnson is the Deputy CFO, oversees a significant part of our, what I would call the procure to pay part of the work that we do, including the procurement area, revenue and collections, which is primarily utility billing, but also other revenues that are collected. Payroll, a very important part that works closely with HR as we work with our different workforce contracts, and then controller, and Lyle Hodges, our controller, is here with us today. Lori had a death in the family and is not able to be here. Also then, in terms of different divisions, investment, capital, and debt, you'll be hearing from Mike Gabelin a little later today. Our budget division, very important, led by Micah Andermill. Development finance, which works closely with CPED on projects that come forward and have been very involved in the inclusionary zoning discussion, led by Mark Winkelhag. Property services, which is currently a vacant position that we are advertising for, and risk management, also a vacant position that we have been advertising for. And then major real estate projects is Greg Goki, who is overseeing both the new office building as well as we are moving quickly into the City Hall renovation part of that project. On the side of the City Hall renovation, some news I'm not sure everybody is aware of, but certainly Councilmember Goodman and the mayor in their role as NBC representatives of the council and the mayor's office. Yesterday at the NBC meeting, the board endorsed a switch of space within City Hall. So the area that is on the other side of third floor, which is the conciliation courts, the county will be moving conciliation courts out of that space later in 2020. The city then will take ownership of that space, and then in exchange, the county will take ownership of space down on first floor, down in this corner of the building. So I think that is an important part of the transformation of this building in terms of just general usages. Current service level is on 2 pages here. Our budget is both general fund and other funds are primarily property services. So because it's paid essentially internal service funds, so it's paid by both enterprise funds, by some of the special revenue funds. It's our way of tracking then how we charge out all of our services for managing buildings, but split pretty equally between those. So overall, more than $50 million. Certainly, as I said, property service is a major part of this, and then the FTEs are along the right side of both columns. We have not too many general changes in the individual line item budgets. We've had some one-time money that is going away. For example, revenue and collections had some software enhancements that went away from 19 to 20. One larger contract that managed by the budget division last year is reduced to $550,000. So other than that, pretty much inflation. The investment capital and debt I'll talk about a little bit later as to why that change is occurring. So 4 change items. We did our best to not impact the general fund tax levy as a department. The first one is one-time dollars. This is under the general term of an asset management strategy. And what we mean by this is, as a city and any larger institution that has property, a best practice is to inventory the condition of all of the property and then be able to prioritize what's in the worst shape in terms of our buildings and equipment. And we do not have that overall inventory to date. And so we have hired a firm that the council has approved the contract for. They haven't started the work to actually go through the inventory of all of our, whether it's a fire station or a police precinct or one of our other city buildings, and say, essentially, how far away are we from the roof needing to be replaced? How far away from the HVAC system, the heating and cooling system being replaced? When is this building just functionally not going to be working anymore, and so we're going to need, for example, a new fire station? So in the past, we oftentimes as a city have relied on, honestly, the squeaky wheel as a way in terms of who are the loudest voices, I think we want to add some element of both clarity and prioritization that is based on need, not exclusively, but certainly as a starting point for this discussion. And then I think that with that type of data in place, and at the same time, Director Intermel's group and budget will be overseeing this, is to expand that then into all asset categories. So what that means is right now we fund many of our asset replacements because it has a funding stream, right? So for example, we have a variety of assets that we provide funding through internal services. Fleet is an example, different types of enterprise funds. And so we're working towards, and this is not just going to be a one-year project, this will be a 4 to 5 year project, to bring you as elected officials the opportunity to weigh, and essentially many of you have talked to us about digging into the base, right? Essentially weighing what are the overall funding of our different asset replacement, and how does that match what we've done to come up with a prioritization of what are the assets that need to be replaced, okay? And I'm not here to tell you that anything is broken. I think generally the city has good infrastructure. We are not like other communities which are 30 years behind, but it's clear even when you walked into our different facilities around the city and you see some of the working conditions that we are not treating everyone equally, and we think the funding system should align with those needs as well. And so that's a one-time expense in 2020. I apologize for the longer explanation, but I do think it's something that you'll be hearing from us not just in this budget year, but for years to come. And our new budget system will give us an opportunity to undertake this. We also have this longer-term goal, and this is, I always like it when Councilmember Cunningham uses the nerd term, because this is getting into really in the weeds, but we have a requirement according to our GASB standards, or Government Accounting Standards Board, requires that we estimate what depreciation is on all of our assets. And Lyle does the best job he can with really limited information, but this asset management inventory will help inform that. It would also then drive our risk management, which is to say, how much of our buildings should we insure? What's really the actual cost of replacing this particular fire station? Right now, we might be working off of 5, 10, 15-year-old data. Okay, so again, nothing's in bad shape for the city. I think your challenge to us is, as we've heard in some of these discussions already today, is to bring you better data so you can make better decisions rather than just what has been going on for the last 5 or 10 years, right? We've had a couple of things that have happened. One in our utility billing in particular is more and more use of credit cards. And right now, we don't charge people more for using a credit card to pay a bill than using direct deposit or ACH or cash, okay? And we will be evaluating the opportunity to collect more through a contract with our credit card services, but we need more budget on the expenditure side. So we promise to bring revenue options to offset this expense. We think that if we don't do anything about it, then the people who use credit cards are being subsidized by the people who don't use credit cards. Right? And so we need the budget authority to be paying more in the credit cards because the use has been expanding so much. But we also have, along with this, the understanding that we need to provide more revenues in order to offset that. And the revenues can come in a variety of ways. One would just be charging our enterprise funds more. The other would be charging those particular users who use the credit cards more for a fee. Currently, it's under our current system, not a very easy thing to do. You almost would have to do what the county does when you go to pay for a license, which is to pay for your bill and then have a second bill that pays for the charges on the credit card. We're trying to find a more seamless way and a less inconvenient way, but ultimately that would be one of the options that we'll be bringing forward to you. Again, not an impact on the general fund budget at all. This, because it's primarily enterprise funds, it's not a property tax levy issue.
Mr. F., Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair Palmisano. Have we asked people to switch to ACH? I mean, can we just kind of start with lowering the cost in that way, because I know ACH fees are a lot lower than credit card fees.
Right.
And I'm not sure people are aware that they're costing the city money right now.
Yeah. Councilmember Palmisano, or Chair Palmisano, Councilmember Fletcher, our utility billing group does a great job with the dashboard. They know every month they track where our revenues are coming. They have provided some impetus because we have the billings that go out oftentimes by mail for the most part, added reminders about this. We certainly could take some feedback from you on how we should word that. That would be more direct about the costs of credit cards and what that means. But I think for those people who have access to credit card and get points off of it, there's a natural incentive for those folks to be using that form of payment if it doesn't cost them anything more.
Mr. Ruff, are there other municipalities in Minnesota that are able to do something more seamlessly than we do today? I appreciate that the counties is a very clunky mechanism, and I wonder if we're somehow hindered by state laws.
Madam Chair, I'm not aware of state law issues. I think we will be bringing forward a new contract for our credit card servicer. We were waiting for that RFP process to conclude before we could definitively answer that question. I think when we bring that contract to you would be a good time to talk through those options. Larry Parker, who is in our controller division, is really an expert in this area, and we will make sure he is prepared for that response.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to say that when I opened up a new credit card, I looked at what I was paying for monthly so I could get the points too. And I noticed that Centerpoint, Excel, even my auto insurance for the annual fees, that they actually charge a percentage on top if you use a credit card. And so is that an option that we could move to so that way it kind of counteracts that incentive for people to use the credit cards?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Johnson, we have looked in depth at this issue under our current contract. It has not been an option in the past, but we will be bringing forward some options for you to consider as a part of that contract. Because again, we want to make it as convenient as possible for people to pay our bills. That's one of the goals that we have within revenue and collections. If you remember previously, our director of utility billing has even brought forth in the last 2 years this service where people who don't have access to credit card or even banking accounts can now go into a retail establishment and just pay their bill with cash, and then that comes to us and we pay those costs of that transaction, often whether it's oftentimes through a drugstore or someplace else. And so we do our best to try to make it convenient and accessible, but just with the increase in the last 3 years of these fees, I think that our systems in our current contract was not able to just simply flip a switch and make the change that you're talking about.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I mean, it is a balance, right? Because this does create a negative externality that just passes the costs on to others. So for a lot of people, when you get these credit card points, whether it's 1% cash back, 2% cash back, essentially then when you're using that credit card for, let's say, 2% cash back, you're getting a discount that other people don't get if they don't use that credit card. And then ultimately you're forcing them to pay you that 2% back through these fees. And so it just seems like a good way to balance it out so that we're not essentially punishing everyone else who does the ACH by having them pay a little bit more so that we can reward people who are using credit cards, which is a behavior that we don't want to see. And since we're looking at a lot of these policies, we're trying to correct for these negative externalities. I know we've got a public hearing coming up, for instance, around a plastic bag fee, right? Because the idea is that you get a plastic bag because it's quote unquote free for people, right? And then that has an environmental cost. That has a cost to our operations for our MRF facility for recycling that others have to pay for. So you're not actually making an informed market decision. So I think it would be consistent with other city policies and directions that we've been going in. And it would ultimately be most fair for all of our utility bill consumers and folks who have to pay fees if we were able to correct that imbalance and that externality. So I appreciate that that's something that we're looking into, and I hope that's the direction we can ultimately go.
Mr. Ruff, don't other departments have similar challenges with credit card fees? I guess I'm thinking of development services in my head.
Looking to Director Intermill, I know we've had some of these discussions. I'm not aware that there's anyone else at this scale. I don't think we allow people to pay for example, large building permits with a credit card. I mean, there are limitations on that. So, Micah, if you have more.
Director Intermill?
Madam Chair, I think we have had a few conversations with CPED that they are also seeing increases in credit card fees. Again, I think to Mr. Ruff's point, it is a scale game, and given the volume of transactions that go through utility billing, it's probably a more acute pain in finance and property services, but it's certainly an issue that does touch other parts of the enterprise.
And on the flip side, parking services would be another example that has a lot of credit card. I think given that unique set of circumstances, we've seen a tremendous increase in revenue since allowing for credit cards, simply because no one has to carry coins along with them all the time and be chronically short of the money that they're putting in. And so instead they are overpaying for potentially the time in exchange for a little more insurance about not getting a ticket. So, each situation is a little different, but I think certainly eventually they will want to look at this issue as well. They are on a different credit card processing system. They work through their parking vendor rather than this particular vendor that we've been working through. That change was made in the last couple of years as well.
Thank you.
Grants are occupying more and more of our financial reporting time. Grants are a good thing, but especially given smaller grants, given more and more, especially requirements of subrecipient, and that term is the idea that when we get a grant and we then give it then to a nonprofit, we are still responsible for making sure that those funds are expended appropriately, undertaking oftentimes on-site visits as a part of the financial oversight and reporting, and we are, again, understaffed for that area. This is another area where it is not going to hit the property tax levy, because our goal, and we won't hire this person until we have a methodology and be able to charge the grant funds in an appropriate fashion for that financial reporting position. And so again, this is similar to credit card fees. We're not going to move forward until we have a revenue source that's going to offset this. So this is not an impact on the general fund. The last area is the council has, and this has happened since the original proposal of the mayor, but the council has approved new investment contracts. We came through Ways and Means and the full council in the last couple of months that pursuant to an RFP. We originally had 4 firms. We changed 2 of those firms as far as providing investment services for the city's core cash investments. And then we also reduced significantly the amount of money that we use outside investment managers for, and we are undertaking internal management of those funds instead. As a part of that, we should be seeing a reduction in fees of $200,000, but in order to take on that added workload, we need 1 FTE, and so when you see a net impact of negative $80,000, it's essentially the net impact is more money to the general fund of $80,000. We have not hired that person and will wait until council formally approves this, but I think this is a good thing all around. It gives us more flexibility and control, relies less on large banks, which is a general direction that you as a council have given us over the last several years. The 2 firms that we did hire, one is primarily a woman-owned firm out of Portland that has shown, even in the short time we've been working with them, Mr. Ablin reports been adding value in ways that are helpful outside of even just the financial transactions, and then a local black-owned firm, T. Rose, who has a smaller amount of the investments. So it's a good balance. We still do need some outside managers. We have relatively simple things we invest in, but a couple of more nuanced investments, we still have the experienced investment managers that have worked with the city for a long period of time. With that complete, thank you for the time. I just want to say it's a great department, Finance and Property Services, people who are always looking at ways of saving money to give you more resources and also to enhance the customer experience. And those customers are both internal customers, but especially with our folks who work with utility billing. And, you know, so many of you see that we have to sometimes move delinquent utility bills to assessments. I mean, they are the face oftentimes of the city in difficult situations and do a tremendous job as well. So I'm appreciative of their efforts.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having all of your staff with you today. Are there any questions or comments from my colleagues at this time? I'm not seeing any. Thank you. Next, we're going to have the capital and debt service presentation. I'm going to have Director Intramural cue this one up.
You bet. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I am slated to give this presentation along with Mike Ablin, our Director of Capital Debt and Investments, because during this year's budget cycle, we transitioned capital budgeting from Mike's team to the budget office. And I did very little work in that process, so it would be very poor for me to present the mayor's recommended capital budget. Robert Harrison, one of our budget analysts, was worked alongside Mike through the click process and is going to give that part of the presentation, followed by Mike Ablin's overview of our debt budget.
Super. Thank you and welcome.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Palmisano, council members, members of the Budget Committee. As Mike stated, my name is Robert Harrison. I'm with the city's budget office. Just want to say thank you for the opportunity to come and present today on the city's 5-year capital improvement program, or CIP as we'll call it, throughout the presentation. Today we will be looking at that full 5-year plan, as well as an overview of the debt service budget for the city's various outstanding bonds. Right off the bat, I do want to recognize, though, that you've probably heard some of this information in a number of different places as a committee. For example, Director Hutchison's presentation this past September on similar subject matter, and recognizing I think the volume of information that we've seen today, we're going to endeavor to keep this at a medium to high level as we go through the full $1 billion capital improvement program for the coming 5 years. So we will take a look at the full 5-year program and where some of those funds are going. We're going to take a look at some of the work that is programmed and budgeted to occur in the coming 2020 budget year, revisit some of the funding sources, that are coming into the program via the 20-year Parks and Streets plan, and then look at some of the projects by major investment area before I turn the presentation again over to Director Ablin. So, starting off, the 2020 through 2024 total capital improvement program is $1.016 billion. What does the slide show? This really shows on the left in that bar chart where the funding is going to be going over the 5-year capital improvement program, and then on the right it shows where the relative funding allocations are going to be going as well. So if you look at the blue bars at the bottom of the chart here, that's our Public Works Department, of course, stormwater, sanitary sewer, water treatment and distribution, and our transportation portfolio of projects as well comprises fully 75% of our overall capital programming over the 5-year period. Stepping up in that chart, you see the yellow bars there. That's our public grounds and facilities program. You can see in 2019 and 2020 and partly in 2021 as well. It's a pretty heavy investment load in that program, and a lot of that is related to, the majority of that is related to the new public service building and City Hall improvements project, without which the capital improvement program would be closer to the $900 million level over the 5 years. The gray bars represent the park board projects that are programmed in as part of our plan. Dark blue bars are municipal building commission projects, and the orange bars are our art and public places, smaller but still important components of the capital improvement program. I also want to call out, from 2019 to 2020 and from 2020 to 2021, we see what appear to be big decreases in the plan. From 2021 through 2024, though, funding levels are fairly stable at just under $200 million. As we look at those funding levels, I have a note on my presentation that we've received inquiries in the past on what that means for our streets funding. I just want to, on behalf of staff, say that the street funding levels that are programmed in as part of this program, as part of this plan, are expected to stay level and in fact increase in accord with the additional resources that are being allocated via the 20-year Parks and Streets Plan. So stepping forward, we're going to now focus in on the coming 2020 budget year, some of the funding sources that will be utilized as part of the capital program. On the left here, we see where those funding sources are going to be going. On the right, we see that overall mix of funding sources relative to each other. And so I think I'll focus on that pie chart for just a moment. You see fully half of our funding is coming from net debt and CIP bonds in the 2020 budget year. Additional 5% is coming from special assessments, approximately 26% there in those two green pie slices. Those are related to enterprise revenues and enterprise bonds that are backed by enterprise revenues, with an additional 19 to 20% of our funding coming in from those miscellaneous sources there: transfers, park capital levy, reimbursements, and so forth. So then if you look at the bar chart that we've presented here, you can see that the Public Works Department, which comprises the transportation and the enterprise lines, really utilizes a heavy mix of all the various funding sources that we're including in the capital program. Transportation, for instance, the blue bar on the bottom there is net debt and CIP bonds, $28.4 million, $12 million in special assessments, $13.7 million in municipal state aid, and $28 million in those various funding sources, including transfers, federal grants, and reimbursements. Then looking over at the enterprise projects, of course, that's a heavy mix of those enterprise revenue funding sources, as well as reimbursements for enterprise projects. Public grounds and facilities, next bar over, heavily on the net debt bond side, as well as some one-time cash funding sources. Park board, net debt bond funded, again, park capital levy, special assessments. Municipal building commission is half Hennepin County grant, half net debt bond, and then art and public places, again, net debt bond. So again, trying to characterize and provide a summary of the heavy mix of various funding sources that were being utilized in the program, especially in the coming appropriation year here. So one thing staff wanted to do was revisit and highlight the importance, and we've done this in the past, revisit and highlight the importance of the 20-year park and street plan sources over the overall funding plan. So the 5-year plan is $1 billion. $158 million of that is coming from sources that have been identified via the park and street funding plan. And for the benefit of the budget committee, as well as those who may be watching in, I wanted to split apart the two directions that these funds are going to be going. Those dark blue bars at the bottom, approximately $8 million a year, with a slight increase beginning in 2022. Those are going to the park board for neighborhood parks projects. And the remaining funding above that dark blue bar are all going towards street infrastructure projects. So the light blue bar there, those light blue bars are net debt bond funding for streets infrastructure projects. The green bars are stormwater revenues being used for the stormwater elements in our streets projects. And the orange bar and the yellow bars there are cash sources that were identified in the streets funding plan for these projects. So at this point, we've taken a really high-level look at where some of these funds are going to be programmed. We've taken a look at the 2020 budget year and some of the sources that will be utilized in that year, and checked in on the streets funding plan as well. At this point, I'd like to step through and take a look at some of the projects, as we've done in past years and past presentations on this subject matter, for the benefit of the committee. So starting off with the Municipal Building Commission, as Director Aaron Delaney presented this past September, we're looking at $1.14 million for various improvements across the City Hall facility. An additional $15.7 million programmed in the out years 21 through 24 for a 5-year total of $16.8 million. And if I could editorialize a little bit, In the prior 5 years of this plan, we saw $6.5 million or so programmed for these projects. The capital plan is reflecting an increased level of investment in our City Hall facility, which is reflective of the amount of need I think that we were seeing coming in through the capital programming process this year. Moving on to the Park Board projects, this is a full list of Park Board projects that are being included in the capital improvement program. I should say that the Park Board will actually be here in front of the Budget Committee this coming Monday, and we'll likely touch upon a number of these projects in their budget presentation. We're looking at $12.5 million in 2020, an additional $51 million in 21 through 24 for a 5-year total of $63.9 million, which is about 6-7% of our total five-year plan. Park Board projects here, these encompass some ongoing program type projects as well as discrete projects, which is fairly consistent with how projects have been submitted in the past. Public Works projects, too numerous to list in one slide, so we're doing here what we've done in past years, which is to list the top 10 projects by size here in the Public Works portfolio. These account for $78.4 million worth of appropriations in 2020, an additional $219.7 million in 21 through 24 for a 5-year total of $298. And again, similar to Park Board, this encompasses some ongoing programmatic type work as well as unique one-time projects. Asphalt paving resurfacing is ongoing program. Central City Parallel Storm Tunnel is a one-time project. Concrete streets rehabilitation, ongoing work that's occurring within the Public Works portfolio of capital projects. Public grounds and facilities, as mentioned earlier, this includes the new City Hall and Public Service Building project, and which is heavily weighting this category of projects that we see in front of us. The 5-year total for public grounds and facilities, $143 million. About 28 are projects that are not that new public service building. And I should note for this presentation today, staff are bringing forward an item in short order that will be actually bringing appropriation that's described in the mayor's recommended budget. We'll be bringing forward appropriation from the 2020 and 2021 years into 2019. Just wanted to preview that here, and that's really intended to enable the city to take advantage of some favorable interest rates on the project. And then we have our art and public places projects. These are formula funded. 1.5% of our net debt bond funding level are going into to our art and public places program. So at this point, I'll stand for any questions, Chair Palmisano, or that the Budget Committee may have. Otherwise, I'll turn the presentation over to Director Ablin for the 2020 through 2024 debt overview.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any questions,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Harrison. Thank you for your presentation.
Thanks.
Mr. Ablin, welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody. Michael Ablin from Finance and Property Services. Talk about the debt budget here and what's going on with the city's debt portfolio. Before I do that, I'd like to talk a little bit about some terms. So you've heard the term net debt bonds mentioned in Robert's presentation. So that is a funding source that is paid for with property taxes. And we have a separate levy for that called the bond redemption levy, which I'll talk about, have a picture of at the next slide. And then debt service we're going to talk about, and that, of course, is referring to both principal and interest on bonds. So I'll talk more about that when we get there. The next slide is the bond redemption levy. So this is what is providing the capacity to do additional street improvements and park projects, etc. And this is growing primarily as a result of the 20-year streets and parks plan. So as we're issuing more debt for that, we need to increase the levy to be able to pay off the debt in a timely manner. So you can see those increases from 2020 through 2024. That's pretty much the finance plan from the one slide Robert had where we were showing the streets increases. In the bottom levy there, we have the library levy and then the new public service center and city hall improvements, and that levy is basically a market value levy to pay off the library debt. Once that's done, we're going to continue that levy, and that basically takes over and helps pay for the new facility. So basically starting in about 2021, 2022, more of that levy will be shifted to pay the debt service on the new building. Okay. This next graph is a picture of the city's outstanding general obligation debt as well as non-general obligation debt. So the general obligation debt is what we use for basically all of our capital program, even including our sewer and water and solid waste and enterprise fund debt. So we have been going down with that debt over time as we've been able to pay off debt. As you can see in 2019, that starts to shift a little bit. With the big project going through, we're going to see perhaps that general obligation category go up for a few years before we start paying off on that. So a little bit of a shift in the gross level of debt. That's general obligation. And the non-general obligation debt is mostly related to what we call a common bond fund program. It's some business financing debt that's existed for a long time over the CPED division. It helps with some business growth and development, and there's a couple other notes in there too that are non-general obligation. All right, let's move on to the good stuff. So this is a picture of the types of things that are in the outstanding debt that was in the previous picture. So the next two slides are going to talk about the debt that is currently on the city's books, as well as debt that we are in the process of issuing, and some growth in certain categories that are already in the financial plans for, like enterprise funds for 2020. So you can see there, there's a note that says back in 2004, our peak debt was reached of $1,299,000,000. We have since brought that level down. At the end of 2019, including the new public service center debt, which we're going to issue and I'll talk about, that amount would be $745 million. And so you can see certain categories of debt that have gone down precipitously. The biggest one of relevance, I believe, is the convention center. So in 2019, we have $26 million of that debt left. In 2020, the budget on the next page will show that we're paying that debt off. So all of the convention center, both the original debt and the expansion project, at the end of 2020, that debt will be paid off. So that's the big, going from $244 million at its peak down to zero by the end of 2020. The other thing that's fairly notable here is tax increment debt. We have not issued very much tax increment debt in the last decade, so that type of debt has been getting paid off as well. Tax increments have been coming in at a larger and larger level with property value increases, so it's been helping us be able to pay this debt down faster. And one thing, there is a note there, this is, we have some debt that we're going to pay off by the end of the year related to tax increment, and then we've also taken some of that debt off the market and turned it into internal loans. So we have $1,710,000 of this debt at the end of this year, and we also have internal loans of $19.2 million. So we use those sort of as investments. We still have to collect the tax increment and pay that debt off internally, and basically we were able to get it out of the hands of investors and make it a city investment basically over time. The other thing that's notable here is the library referendum bonds. That debt is going to be hopefully defeased entirely after 2021. So we got about 12 million of debt service in 2020, and then in 2021, along with resources we get from the state, we'll be able to pay off that debt. And that's sort of the legacy debt that's now part of the county system. They own the assets and they take care of the libraries and maintain them. But this is part of our last city commitment to paying for what basically, for the most part, was a central library. Okay. All right, let's go on to the debt service budget itself. So in 2020, including what we're going to be issuing for the new public service center and on an estimate of some of the items that are in finance plans, our debt budget will be $150.8 million. This is probably going to be one of the larger, if not the largest budget for the city due to some big things that are getting paid off. So if you look at the convention center there, that's the end of it. So next year, when we're doing the 2021 debt service budget, right off the bat, 26 million or 27 million will not be there for that particular category of debt. So we should see a large drop in our outstanding debt. Now, that is somewhat replaced by a financial commitment to the stadium that is going to utilize some of the tax revenues that were otherwise going toward the convention center. We talked about the library debt, so 12.2 million of debt service there. And then next year in 2021, we will have a comparable level of debt service, but then we're going to be able to have bonds that are callable, and we'll have revenues received from the state that are going to help us take that debt out. So that is, and that will be replaced with debt that is related to the public service center. So, any other questions anybody has about any of the categories of debt here? A lot of this stuff is sort of routine year after year. Net debt bond, debt service, and special assessments are related to the streets projects that are going on and the financing that the residents have on their share of that cost of roadway improvements. And that debt just keeps moving through the system. It goes up and it goes down, it goes up and it goes down. It's routine. Okay, if no questions, I'll move on to variable rate debt. The city has historically used variable rate debt as a tool to help diversify our types of debt that we have, and sometimes there's a financial benefit to variable rate debt. There has been historically. In fact, it's one of the reasons why we were able to pay off the central library debt as fast as we did. We did have a lot of that debt in variable rate mode during the time frame that rates were very, very low after the Great Recession. And so we kept taxing the same amount of resources per year, and that allowed us to pay off a lot more debt because we were incurring a lot less interest expense. So that helped us get out of that debt category quicker. Right now, we just have two pieces of that debt remaining. One of them is related to the Nicollet Mall and the financing of the new Nicollet Mall improvements. And then the other is for the parking ramp related to the Guthrie. And those two pieces of debt total about $29.5 million. And you can see there we have current rates are in the 1.8 to 1.9% range. So it's fairly cost-effective debt for the city. And finally, I'm going to talk about the upcoming bond sale. Robert alluded to it. So there's an action going before you tomorrow to approve the issuance of the debt for November sale for the Public Service Center. That will be the balance of the financing that we're going to incur for that facility. So we're basically going to be able to get all of the debt issued that facility will have on it with this sale and take advantage of interest rates that are then going to allow us to structure that debt into the long-term finance plan that was set out earlier for the project. And the action that's before you tomorrow will approve the 2020 and 2020 budget for that facility early, basically. We needed to get the bonds and the authority to issue the bonds approved and the appropriations to incur the capital expenditures approved. We couldn't really wait till January 1's adoption of the budget to issue, when we wanted to issue the debt and get that done in November. So that's why that action is before you tomorrow. And there's still some things happening with debt before the end of the year. We're prepaying some things. This new issuance, we don't know exactly what the debt service will be until we sell the bonds. So when we get to the budget markup for council adoption, we will actually have a technical amendment that will take basically what's in the mayor's recommended budget to what we need with known debt activity at the end of the year to adjust the debt service budget. So that will be coming summarized as a technical amendment. Okay. That's about all I have for you.
I don't see any questions or comments from my colleagues at this time. Just taking a quick look.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, that actually concludes our list of departments for today. There's a couple housekeeping items. The first is that I'd like to make a motion to receive and file all 6 of the items that we've heard this afternoon. That would be the IGR Department Review, the NCR Department Review, IT, HR, Finance and Property Services, and Capital and Debt Service presentations. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. I wanted to just remind my colleagues that on Monday, which is our next and last budget committee where we're just hearing departmental briefings, on Monday we're scheduled to have the convention center right at 9:30, followed by the park board, then civil rights, and then the mayor's office. That said, we have some overflow time for presentations scheduled and held on your calendars for November 4th. I've been being asked if I should maybe release that date, but I'm going to hold it right now just because I know that sometimes with park board and people coming in from other places, things happen, and if we aren't able to make these presentations on Monday, then we will use that November 4th time, but chances are most likely that we will not need that time on November 4th. So I just want to let you be aware of those things. Without any other questions or comments from my colleagues, which I'm not seeing any, we will stand adjourned. Thank you for your time today.